Lesson 26, Squaring Shortcut number 1. Here's part 1. Multiply using the standard algorithm. Here we have 25 squared, 35 squared, 45 squared, and 55 squared. This is what students' work should look like when they've completed part 1. Here the products are 625, 1,225, 2,025, and 3,025. Here's part 2. Students are going to follow along with their instructor to learn squaring shortcut number 1. And notice that it says, this shortcut is very elegant, but it only works when squaring a base that ends with the number 5. So the shortcut will work for 25 squared because 25 ends with the number 5. It'll work for 35 squared because 35 ends with a 5. It'll work for 45 squared because 45 ends with a 5. And it'll work for 55 squared because 55 ends with a 5. Let's learn the squaring shortcut in box E. Here we have 25 squared, and once again the shortcut will work because 25 ends with a 5. So the first step is to circle 5 times 5, and that gives us 25, so write it down. Next, look at this 2. Cross it off and think one more. 1 more than 2 is 3. Write it down. 3 times 2 equals 6. Final answer, 625. And notice how that matches our previous answer. Let's try box F. Here we have 35 squared. So circle 5 times 5. That gives us 25. Write it down. Next, cross off the 3 and think one more. 1 more than 3 is 4. Write it down. 4 times 3 equals 12. Final answer, 1,225. And once again, that matches our previous answer. Next example, box G. Here's 45 squared. So circle 5 times 5. That gives us 25. Next, cross off this 4 and think one more. 1 more than 4 is 5, so write it down. 5 times 4 equals 20. Final answer, 2,025, just like it says here. Last example, box H. Here is 55 squared. So let's circle 5 times 5. That gives us 25. Next, cross off this 5 and think one more. 1 more than 5 is 6. And 6 times 5 gives us 30. Final answer, 3,025, just like it says here in box D. Here's part 3. Students are going to follow along with their instructor to learn why squaring shortcut number 1 works. Box I involves using expanded notation in the workspace. Box J involves factoring, and you can refer to lesson 14, box P, for a hint. Here's box I. Here we have the problem 25 squared, just like you see here, except we're going to solve it using expanded notation. So the first step is 5 times 5. Let's write it down here in the workspace. The next step is 2 times 5, which really means 20 times 5. Write it down in the workspace. Next we have 5 times 2, which really means 5 times 20, or 20 times 5. Write it down. Finally, we have 2 times 2, which really means 20 times 20. Write it down in the workspace. Now let's find each of those partial products and find the sum. Here, 5 times 5 equals 25. Write it down. Next, 20 times 5 equals 100. Here, 20 times 5 equals 100. And finally, 20 times 20 equals 400. Let's find the sum. And our final answer is 625, just like we see here. Now let's use box E and box I to figure out why the shortcut works. In the shortcut, the first step was 5 times 5 equals 25. And you can see that here. 5 times 5 equals 25. And this 25 is the same 25 that you see here. So we just need to figure out where 3 times 2 equals 6 comes from, because I don't see that here. Let's use box J to help us. We know that this product is accounted for, so we just need to account for these 3 remaining products. So let's rewrite this horizontally in box J. Here we have 20 times 5, so write down 20 times 5 plus 20 times 5, write down 20 times 5 plus 20 times 20. Here's 20 times 20. And notice that in each of these 3 terms, they all have a factor of 20. In the next line, let's factor out the 20. So we're going to factor out 20, and inside the parentheses, we'll have 5 plus 5 plus 20. Write it down. Here's 5 plus 5 plus 20. Now, let's simplify 5 plus 5. Here's the 20, write it down. 5 plus 5 equals 10, write it down. Plus 20. Here's plus 20. Now let's simplify this. Here's 20. And 10 plus 20 equals 30, so write it down. And finally, let's simplify this. 20 times 30 equals 600. Let's take a closer look to understand the shortcut. Underline this 2 in 20 and this 3 in 30. And notice that this 2 and this 3 are the same as this 2 and this 3 in the shortcut. This just means 20 times 30. Here we have 20 times 30. And where did this 30 come from? And that came from the previous line. 20 plus 10 gave us 30. And notice that 2 plus 1 equals 3. That's why we crossed off this 2, counted up by 1, and wrote down 3. Also notice this. 3 times 2 gave us the 6 in 600. Here, 3 times 2 gave us the 6 in 600. Here's part 4. Use the squaring shortcut that you just learned for bases that end with the number 5. Here's box K. Here we have 15 squared, and the shortcut will work because we're squaring a base that ends with 5. So step 1 is circle 5 times 5, which gives us 25. Next, cross off this 1 and think 1 more. That gives us 2. 2 times 1 equals 2. Final answer, 225. In box L, we're squaring a 3-digit number. 105 squared. First step, Circle 5 times 5, and that gives us 25. Next, cross off 10 and think one more. One more gives us 11. 11 times 10 equals 110. Final answer, 11,025. Now let's use the squaring shortcut horizontally in box M. Here's 65 squared. Cross off the 6, write a 7. 6 times 7 equals 42. 5 times 5 equals 25. Final answer, 4,225. Here's the next example. 75 squared. Cross off the 7, write an 8. 7 times 8 equals 56. 5 times 5 equals 25. Final answer, 5,625. Let's move on to box N. Here's 35 squared, and the shortcut will work because we're squaring a base that ends with 5. So first, don't think 3 times 3, think 3 times 4. 3 times 4 gives us 12. Next, 5 times 5 gives us 25. Final answer, 1,225. Here's the next problem. 25 squared. First, don't think 2 times 2, think 2 times 3, and that gives us 6. 5 times 5 gives us 25. Final answer, 625. Here's the next example. 45 squared. Don't think 4 times 4, think 4 times 5, and that gives us 20. 5 times 5 gives us 25. Final answer, 2,025. Here's the last problem. 15 squared. Don't think 1 times 1, think 1 times 2, and that gives us 2. 5 times 5 gives us 25. Final answer, 225, just like you see here.